And in spite of how weird this is going to be for me, with you all, you're still mostly regionally in the same place that you would normally be sitting. So at least there's that. All right. Well, this morning we're going to talk about love. As we've been going through, we didn't get to do joy last week because we weren't here, but we're working through the season of Advent, and so fitting that the Sunday before Christmas we talk about love. But where I wanted to start is exactly where you probably thought that we would start on the Sunday before Christmas, and that is, I wanted to start by talking about spitting in people's faces, which I know was on your bingo card for sure of things we were going to talk about this morning. So you've seen it in movies, TV. If you were sitting too close, you might have been experiencing it this morning, but thankfully you guys are back far enough. I don't think my distance is quite that far. I won't get too fired up. You've seen it in movies and TV, recently maybe in the NFL if you were watching. There's been some instances of that which were not great, but in those moments that you see someone spitting in someone's face, there's kind of two ways in TV and movies that you see it. Usually it's somebody who's being pressed for information, right? They're showing defiance. It's that moment of just kind of, I'm not going to go along with you. And it's just this really clear, in a situation where there is no real control or capability, it's this last kind of act of defiance. And that resonates with us when it's the good guy. We're like, yeah, that's right. You tell him. You don't cave no matter what. And if it's the bad guy, you're like, oh, what a scumbag. That is the worst. They are just awful. They won't even concede when they're helpless. And we kind of have that relationship to it, right? But it's very clear that it is this act of defiance and rebellion against whatever the assertion of authority is. And so, don't ask me how my brain arrived at this in connection to Christmas, but this is what I was thinking of as I was thinking about the Christmas story, because one of the things we like to do, thinking about the Christmas story, is we think about the pretty parts of Christmas, right? We think about, this is a weird example, with palm trees, but we think about the Christmas decorations and Christmas carols and snow. Even if we don't really love snow, it is pretty to look at, especially if you're inside. We like those parts of Christmas. We like the time with family and the food and the gift giving and all of those parts. We like that. And it lets us kind of underplay the reason for Christmas. Why does Christmas even need to exist in the first place? Why do we celebrate this? What significance is it? And so, despite our lack of power, our insignificance in the scope of the world, we also, like these guys who are spitting in the face of their antagonist, you might say, we repeatedly choose rebellion against God. From Adam and Eve to you and I, we've proven ourselves laughably incapable of choosing anything but defiance. Now, we probably wouldn't classify it as defiance all the time. Sometimes it's like, I just messed up. I just made a mistake, right? I meant to do this, but then I didn't instead. If you've had that conversation if you have children and you've had that conversation with them, very rarely is that an acceptable excuse, right? And I was trying to follow your rules, but then I didn't instead. Okay. Well, that's not a great excuse. We don't accept that from kids, but we do like to offer that ourselves. We definitely like it when it's on our side. But in the face of that very defiance, that rebellion, God demonstrates his radical love, and that is the story of what Christmas is, right? This radical love in the face of disgusting defiance. Romans 5 lays this out for us, 5:6-8. For while we were still helpless at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For rarely will someone die for a just person, though for a good person perhaps someone might even dare to die. But God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Right. Now, jumping back to our analogy, how many times when the bad guy is spitting in the face of the good guy who's interrogating them, do you think, just punch him? Right? That's the emotion that you feel when you see that guy who's just being a scumbag, who's just defiant of what is right. You think, all right, they deserve to get what's coming to them. That's where we land most of the time. And yet we serve a God who, in the midst of that moment, in the midst of our defiance, said, okay, for whatever reason, he believed you and I were worth overcoming that defiance for. Humbling himself, coming to earth, and dying to reconnect that brokenness. Our culture as Americans puts a high value on contribution. We venerate people who build things through determination, grit, and hard work. We love rags to riches stories. They're some of the best, right? We love to read them. We love to hear them. Those are great. Those are encouraging to us because it supports this intrinsic idea that our country espouses of building things up and of growth and of progression and of achievement. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but it does make it really hard sometimes for us to wrap our brains around the gospel. It complicates our understanding of God. In a society that puts a high value on work and personal contribution, the idea of loving an undeserving person unconditionally is complicated. We really like the idea of unconditional love in a vacuum, right? That concept, nobody says, ugh, unconditional love, gross. Not in favor of that. As a generic idea, great. It's when you start putting faces on the other side of who we're supposed to love that it becomes complicated, right? We start deciding who should be acceptable on the other side of that unconditional love, even if we don't do it on purpose, right? We wouldn't probably, if we were called to account for the people we chose to love, we would probably get really uncomfortable when we started to have to address how we really think naturally. But we do have that idea that there are some people who are just beyond the pale. When our worldview demands personal contribution in order to achieve upward mobility, it flies in the face of a right view of God. What can easily happen is we end up with this twisted idea where God's presenting us with an opportunity, not a mercy. God's not giving you an opportunity. An opportunity requires capability, right? Have you ever heard that idea of, I've entirely lost the the quote, so I apologize. But being ready for an opportunity is a lot more important than just having the right opportunity. You do have to actually seize that opportunity. You have to be able to do something about it, right? So you build skills so that when an opportunity presents itself, there's a much more concise way to say this that I've lost, so I apologize. But when you are ready, you can take advantage of that opportunity when it presents itself. But that still puts the onus on you to do something, right? You still have to be the one to do it. You still have to be the one to pursue it. You still have to be the one to make it happen. If you are presented with a great opportunity to be the CEO of a company and you don't know anything about the business, it will not matter that the opportunity was presented to you. You're going to do a bad job, right? Because the onus is still on you to do something. And so we're not presented an opportunity. We're presented a mercy. God is not offering you a job in the mailroom where if you work hard enough, you can one day be the CEO of the company. You can work your way up and you can achieve great things because of what you did. And God's just given you a foot in the door. That's not what this story is. That sounds great. We love that story. We love to hear it. We love to watch it. We love to read it because we love a rags to riches story. And we definitely love the idea of being the main character in a rags to riches story because that's about our achievement and that's our favorite thing, right? Our own achievement. The problem is that in the story of salvation, you are not a down-on-your-luck, unemployed person looking for a chance to prove yourself. You are a rebel, a criminal, a terrorist. We view the law of the one true king with complete disdain. We spit in the face of the creator of the universe at every opportunity. And this is true for all generations. You read through the Old Testament, at every opportunity we choose rebellion. Romans 6:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's not exclusions. You're really arguing only about how much rebellion were you involved in. Is that a very successful argument? I don't personally think so. How much have I disobeyed is a pretty bad argument. Think of that conversation with your kids. How many, if they were arguing, well, I only broke most of the rules. I didn't break all of them. Not a very compelling argument in their favor. And it's no more compelling in ours. That's the understanding that we arrive at the Christmas story with. It is for just such an unlovable person that God came in the form of his son Jesus to a broken and rebellious world on a mission to redeem a thoroughly undeserving people. And that's a kind of love we can't really comprehend. If it's any consolation, the people who were walking with Jesus didn't understand it either. They expected a Messiah to right the wrongs of the world in a specific way. The focus was still on the restoration of God's people to their freedoms and wholeness and all of the aims that they had for the earth, not this reconciliation with God. That was probably somewhere in some of their minds, but that wasn't the primary thing that the disciples were concerned with. They were concerned with the world being made right, their lives being made right, their way of life being made right. Even the guys who spent Jesus' whole ministry with him didn't get it. And we have evidence of this by the always hapless and still somehow a person I relate to more than any of the other disciples, Peter. We only have it from Peter because John, calls him out. But everybody else says a guy, but John says who it is. Specifically in Matthew, it says, "At that moment, one of those with Jesus reached out his hand and drew his sword. He struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. Then Jesus told him, 'Put your sword back in its place, because all who take up the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and he will provide me here and now with more than 12 legions of angels? How then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?'" This is what happens when Jesus is being arrested. And to me, I read this, and I immediately thought of sort of this moment that if you've had children, you probably remember. Have you ever had a moment with a toddler where they insist on doing something that they're completely incapable of doing? You get this stage where it's, "I can do it." Most commonly uttered phrases by Caleb is entering this phase. So it must be 2 to 3, somewhere in there, maybe even into 4, where they're insistent, "I can do it." And you know they can't do it. You know that they're going to do it badly, and they're insistent, "I could do it." And I'm reminded of this silliness of this moment that Jesus is, and the way he's calling this out. "Or do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and he will provide me here and now with more than 12 legions of angels?" Do you think for a second that any of this was ever outside of my control, Peter? That's what he's saying here. Who do you think you're talking to, Peter? That you need to grab control and that you need to make this happen? What a silly notion. And we do that exact same thing to God. "Okay, God, I got this from here. I could do it." Said in our best toddler voice, "I could do it." It underscores this idea of how our relationship to God is and what is needed for our salvation. "I got this, God. Stand back and let me work." And the absurdity of it is God is looking at us going, "You don't even know what you're trying to redeem yourself from, let alone how to do it. What are you talking about? How could you possibly think I'm not in control?" And after Jesus is crucified, buried, and raised from the dead on the third day, he leaves us with a clear mission: go and make disciples. We're sent out to live and teach the same kind of radical love that God demonstrated for us. And just as God did for us, we're commanded to do it without qualifications. We don't pick a face that's easy to deal with. We love the very kinds of people who would spit in our faces, curse us, and defy us for everything we stand for. We don't like that as much. Because when somebody spits in my face, loving them is not on my mind. The reality is we can't live that way. That's why Jesus tells you have to die to yourself. Take up your cross and follow me. This is going to be a thing you have to do every single day, multiple times a day. Stop picking my way and start saying, "God, if this person spits in my face, I can tell you what I'm going to do, so you're going to have to be in control here because I need to love this person." We live in a world that wants to demonize those who are different from us, wants to point fingers and give you someone to blame. They're the reason things are bad. If we got rid of this kind of person, our country might finally get things turned around. those liberals are the real problem, or those conservatives, or socialists, or billionaires, or people on welfare. Somebody is the problem. Anything to avoid actually stopping and recognizing the truth. We are all enemies of the state. We are the enemies of the one true God. We are hopeless to fix any of our problems. And getting rid of anybody who's an inconvenience to us will not stop us from still being the problem. It might make some things about the way that we want to do things less problematic. It might make us easier able to find ways to do the things we want to do. I was reading through, thinking through, and it popped into my head because it's in one of the Sing movies that Caleb likes. The Frank Sinatra song, My Way, which is maybe the saddest song I think I've ever heard. Because it's something we relate to. This idea that we want to do things the way we want to do them, and the 16th century preacher John Bradford said it a little bit differently. There but for the grace of God go I. Without Jesus, we are hopelessly lost and irredeemable. So it's this comical idea that we have where we foolishly, as believers, accept this grace, accept this gift of Jesus pulling us out of this pit that we cannot come out of our own, hauling us out, and then we turn around and we look down into that pit and we condemn those people who are still in it. And we look down on them with some kind of arrogance as if we've accomplished something. That would be, if we saw that in practice, it would be the silliest thing you could even imagine, right? How did those idiots get down in there after we've just been pulled out of it? Somehow we get amnesia and we forget where we just came from. Or we try to build the case that we were in a different pit. Their pit is way deeper than my pit. I was in this shallow pit, and it's not so bad a pit. What a nonsensical idea. What I did wasn't so bad. I only fell part of the way down the pit. Look how far down in there they are. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he answered this way. He said to them, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commands." So what? Do you radically love people around you? Or do you just love people who are easy to love? Do you love people who act and think and behave mostly like you? They're a little bit off. They've got some rough edges, but they're really relatively easy to deal with. And so you love them and call it a sacrifice. Are you an example to God's grace to those around you? Or would it be impossible to tell the difference between you and the average American who holds Judeo-Christian ideologies but rejects the idea of humility, submission, and love that Jesus taught? Because those people are pretty easy to love. They think like me. They're not that different. They reject Jesus, but they still, they more or less follow good things. I can get along with those people. We live in this world with a very blurry idea of Christians. I have many friends and family members myself that they view the church with deep distrust because we have shown ourselves to be a lot louder about what we're against than what we're for. What would it look like if our love was as loud as our hate? What would it look like for our love to be loud, to be hard to ignore? What would it look like in your day-to-day to love people who people would look at it and go, they don't deserve that. Why are you treating them the way that you're treating them? They deserve retribution. What would it look to love in that way? That would be remarkable, right? That would catch people's attention. Those were the people that Jesus was shocking about. He loved people that society had already written off. And it was disruptive. It did not always make things easy. Make no mistake, loving difficult people is messy. But it was necessary. feel like I read this passage every time that I preach, and I find it in my message every time. It's definitely, in my opinion, the verse that I dwell on the most, but in 2 Corinthians 5:20, youth group gets tired of hearing it. Everybody gets tired of hearing it. It's going to keep coming up because it's the truth. It's our mission. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, since God is making his appeal through us. We plead on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. You are not here to be an example, performatively demonstrating faith without ever connecting to the lost. You're not here to be a spiritual hall monitor, calling out bad behavior, reporting it to the teacher, and obnoxiously upholding and condemning rules. You're here to be an ambassador. You're here on a mission of love. God sent his Son to this earth to live a blameless life and die for you and I. And somehow, in spite of knowing this, we have raised ourselves up to a degree that we can't be bothered. God, who created everything with a word, can come to this earth and humble himself by putting himself in our form and living a life, and that we can't be bothered just to disrupt our lifestyle, our schedule, inconvenience ourselves to love difficult people. How much more ashamed should we be to be in that kind of defiance where God can give up that much for us, and we can say, no, that's a little too much, God. I got a lot of things going on. So this Christmas, as you celebrate with your families, remember what this gift is. You were not gifted this cutesy little nativity scene narrative, this sweet, quiet baby Jesus and these hymns and songs that we sing in this quiet moment. You were gifted amnesty for treason. I don't think we think about the gravity of our sin enough. Jesus' death and resurrection paid the penalty for your sin and mine. He only asks that we follow him and that we share that love with everyone indiscriminately. The catch is that you aren't capable of following. Like a toddler, you will revert back to the I can do it. And you'll blunder on into the kinds of trouble that toddlers who think they can do things get into. If we want to follow God, it means dying to ourselves, our wants, our desires daily. The second you take your eye off of that, you will grab the wheel back and you will try to take control again, and you'll start messing stuff up again, unless I'm the only one. I've done it mid-conversation before. You maybe have too. Start good. Oh, this is going okay. Oh, hold on, let me add some flow. Oh, no, I messed it up, and we're back again. Choosing each day to serve the God who spared us from our rebellion instead of choosing to rebel. That's our mission. Keep choosing God. Keep sharing that love with others. That's what the Christmas story is about. Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Son. I thank you for the message of redemption. I pray that you help us during this season never to forget what we're saved from. Saved from our own hubris, our own incompetence, our own hostility toward you. I thank you that you love us, that you desire what's best for us, and that you sent your Son to redeem us from ourselves. I pray that you would give us a spirit of reconciliation, a spirit of love, and a desire to see people made right with you. That you'd send us out into the world with this fire to let that love shine through. Help us never to forget what it cost for us to be made right with you. Help us never to forget the task of loving our neighbor. And when in those moments when we feel too weak, God, help us to remember that we can't do it and to lean on you. Pray that you'll bless us as we go. That we'll keep your message at the center of our hearts. Thank you, God. Pray all these things in your name.